Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books that we read and the people that write them come to life. It's a wonderful schus to welcome Rabbi Abie Rotenberg. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Abie.
Aleichem Shalom, Rabbi Shlomo, good to be here.
Thank you so much for coming, and a tremendous mazel tov on your most recent release of Rabbi Akiva, a beautiful Sefer Kaddish, really, that speaks about the teachings and the life of Rabbi Akiva. I've heard amazing reviews, and B'chazdei Hashem, I think you're onto something.
Well, Rabbi Akiva, he doesn't need an introduction from me. He's a legend in Klal Yisrael, a beloved Tana with so many stories, a fascinating life, tragic life in many ways, but also fascinating. And of course, a man who gave us so much Torah and so much knowledge. Certainly a figure worth studying and learning about, and I hope I've achieved that with this book. It should give a window into Rabbi Akiva for anyone who's interested, and it's in the English language, which is there are really not that many other options out there to do that kind of study.
Amazing. So before we jump into the actual content of the book and the life of Rabbi Akiva, I want to ask you just like a few things to kind of frame our discussion. Mm-hmm. So I know most of the Jewish world knows you from your songwriting, not just your book writing. Right. Hamal Chagoyel, Achenu, Who Spilled the Milk on the Kitchen Floor, It's Time to Say Good Shabbos. Mm-hmm. Is there a commonality between songwriting, book writing? Is it the same creative muscle?
Well, I wouldn't say songwriting so much. If somebody writes a nigunim, and he uses psukim or chazal, and he's putting those words to his melodies, I don't know if there's an element of writing in that, but certainly if you're a lyricist, if you're writing original lyrics, you have to know something about writing. You have to have a good command of the language, of the English language. Script writing as well, the marvelous Midos machine you mentioned. Okay. So I did write scripts when I was much younger, back in the 1980s, and then The Golden Crown was again another script that we wrote many years ago. So I had some experience with that, and I was pretty good in school, with English and writing, and I had some success over there.
And you wrote the life of Eliyahu
Right.
Navi.
So
that was your first book.
Right. My first foray into writing was was with Eliyahu Navi. It's interesting. Off the top of anyone's head, if you ask about fascinating personalities in Jewish history, and whether it's from the days of Tanakh or the days of the Tanoim, the Amoraim, probably people would, on one hand, could list you people who had lives that were both interesting, fascinating, as well as filled with Torah and knowledge and teachings. Eliyahu Navi certainly one of them. His life as the primary Navi in the days of Achav and Izebel, fighting against Avodah Zarah, Har Carmel, going up to Har Sinai, reviving a child. I mean, these are incredible events in his life, as well as his teachings and the Chazal that discuss what we know from him. Tana de Eliyahu, many believe, was written by Eliyahu Navi himself. He certainly came and learned with Tanoim and Amoraim that are mentioned in the Gemara. It's a fascinating life, and it intrigued me, and I didn't know of a specific sefer written about Eliyahu Navi. So at the time, I started to write, little by little, do research. And the book came to life, and I was fortunate and lucky enough that ArtScroll deemed it worthy of being added to its wonderful library of books. So I had some experience with that. I also wrote a novel for Kiruv called The Season of Pepsi Myers. And whoever's watching this video, I urge, if they're not familiar with that book, if you have a coworker, or if you have a neighbor with a teenage child who isn't aware of Yiddishkeit or doesn't know the first thing about Judaism, it's a good book to give. Buy it for them and give it to them as a gift, because it's about baseball and it's about the Yankees and a World Series, but infiltrated into the storyline are the hashkafas, basic hashkafas of Yiddishkeit. And you can't go directly to them and argue philosophy with children today. You can't do the 19 letters of Rav Shamshon Raphael Hirsch anymore. We're just not capable of understanding or finding children who would find that compelling. So it would be very, 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 very nice for me if people who watch this would look into that. And utilize
sounds
it.
like a plan.
I hope so.
I think it's good also for regular from people. There's a lot of...
Wasn't published by ArtScroll, but I'm sure they don't mind.
Fantastic. So I know that Rabbi Akiva has been percolating in the back of your mind for at least 2 decades, because in 1984, you wrote a song about Rabbi Akiva,
Yes.
which I actually just listened to today again to get the creative juices flowing, and it's really beautiful and it's magnificent. So it's obviously been on your mind. Just a little trivia question out there. Can anyone think of a song that Rabbi wrote that has Eliyahu Hanavi in it? An English song with Eliyahu Hanavi, and we said maybe we should give them a free book or something if they do.
Okay.
So obviously Rabbi Akiva was something you'd been thinking about. But I guess my first real question to you about the book is, like, why Rabbi Akiva? I know his life is fascinating, Eliyahu Hanavi's life is fascinating, but you invested a lot of time in Kochas HaNefesh into writing about Rabbi Akiva. Why Rabbi Akiva?
So I would say it's really along the same lines. It's a man whose life was filled with anecdotes, stories, compelling stories, ignorance in his first 40 years of life, a tremendous devotion to catching up and recapturing his lost youth by going to study for 12 years, and then another 12 years. His fascinating wife, Rachel Baskal B'Savua, who supported him and lived a life of poverty for so many years, and the deprivation. And of course, after he became great, losing Talmidim, supporting Bar Kokhba and leading a Jewish revolt against the Romans who were terrorizing the Jews of Eretz Yisrael in those years. It's a fascinating stories, plus once again so much Torah and Chazal. It's Chazal after Chazal. It's not like most of what we know and what we hear about, certainly in our circles, comes from Chazal. Yes, there are historians who, they picked up this, they picked up that, they think this is what happened, and they bring down sources maybe that aren't so reliable for us. But through Chazal, we know most of what we know about Rabbi Akiva and the times. And taking apart a Chazal, trying to understand the message in it, if there are diversions between, or distinctions between different Chazal, why is this one say this and why does that one say that when they're speaking about the same thing? Is there a disagreement? Or it's just something I enjoy doing, and I love to try to find the truth and the basic meaning of the text and the basic meaning of the Gemara or the Medrash. And
it's very evident, and when I read this book, you spent so much time really coming up with the pshat and trying to reconcile and come up with a Havana that's, I think, Shaveh L'chol Nefesh, that really anyone that reads can come to an understanding. How long did it take you to write the book?
So Eliyahu, we finished in I think 2016, 2016 was published. It probably took a half a year before I decided to do Rabbi Akiva, and maybe 5-6 years took, and Eliyahu took longer because Eliyahu I was still working a full-time job, so it was I would catch up on Eliyahu on the weekends or in the evenings, and Rabbi Akiva the last few years I had already retired from my day job, so I was able to the last couple of years invest a lot of time in it. So
I was really hoping
faster.
That you would tell me that it took you 12 years, and then you came home.
And my wife said, go back and do...
Saying, I wish he would do another 12 years.
Fantastic.
That's what I was really hoping. Okay,
yeah.
It's definitely, it's a work of art. And, just double-clicking on what you said before about the life of Rabbi Akiva, one of the things that jumped out at me when I was reading the Sefer was that on some level, Rabbi Akiva's life is almost like a microcosm for Klal Yisrael. There's so many peaks and valleys. There's Klal Yisrael in its greatest moments. It's Klal Yisrael in its darkest moments. And yet the legacy of Rabbi Akiva continues to shine bright. And is that not the story of Am Yisrael?
That's right.
That was like a takeaway that I took when I read the book, and there's so many different makayers in there, but just like it's trying to come together. That was a feeling or sentiment that I got when I was.
Yes.
Rabbi, can you talk to us a little bit about Rachel, Rabbi Akiva's wife? I think at one of the chapters you conclude with such a beautiful way that that's what I remember reading at least, that there's Rabbi Akiva's life. Rabbi Akiva was almost like the Moshe Rabbeinu of Torah Sheba'al Peh, but none of it could really have happened without his wife Rachel, who believed in him in the most substantial way. It's such a chizuk to hear that, that one woman literally saved the history of Klal Yisrael. What were your feelings when you were looking into the life of Rachel, and maybe share with us just a message from it?
Yeah, so at the end of the chapter, after investing quite a bit of time and effort into those chazal, which discuss Rachel and her interaction with Rabbi Akiva, I said we have heroines in Jewish history, of course, the imahos, Chana, who initiated tefillah or silent tefillah and gave birth to Shmuel Hanavi, and then you have Esther Amalka and what she went through, and maybe a few other women but Rachel Bas Kalba Savua Eishes Rabbi Akiva deserves a place on that podium along with those other women, because what she did was to obviously not only support Rabbi Akiva as a devoted wife, but without her, he never would have been known. His name would not be on the cover of a book or in anybody's minds, because she saw something in this shepherd, and she felt that she could change Klal Yisrael if she somehow motivates this man. He was probably 20 years older than her at the time. We don't know for sure how old she was, but it seems she was around 20. And she saw something in him, and she said, I have to motivate this man to go study and go learn. And if I can do that, it might impact Klal Yisrael in an amazing way. And she was right. And
then she has this 2+ decades of Mesiras Nefesh where she doesn't even have her husband at home.
It's very interesting. There's a chazal that says that she would cut her hair, sell her hair, and send Rabbi Akiva the money. And there's a chazal that says that Rabbi Akiva would go out in the forest. He was learning all day and probably 3/4 of the night, but in his little spare time, he went out into the forest, collected wood, sold the wood, and sent her back the money. So there was, money going this way, money going that way. They certainly corresponded and certainly, tried to support each other from a distance. And when finally Rabbi Akiva, early on in their relationship, she was faltering a little bit. It's mashma from Chazal. She was getting so hard. They were living in a barn. They were sleeping on straw, and she came from a house of luxury. She came from
the wealthiest.
She came from the wealthy. She was from she was a princess in Klal Yisrael. She was the daughter of the wealthiest man in Yerushalayim. And she was living in a barn, sleeping on straw. And apparently she was faltering a little bit. So Hashem sent a shliach to give her a little chizuk. And who was that shliach? Eliyahu Hanavi.
So this is where both of your books come together.
They come together, right? It's in both books, the story. Anyway, and he knocks on the door, and he tells young Akiva and his young wife, I'm a poor man. My wife just gave birth to a baby. We don't have any straw. Could you please lend us a bit of straw to sleep on? And they both realize that we have it bad, but there are people who have it worse than us, and and it gave them strength. It gave her strength, and that's when he went off to yeshiva. She sent him away. She had a new resolve to persevere and to go on and to endure.
And probably many people are not even familiar with this, but she was not his only wife, correct?
Yes. We don't know the name of his first wife. We don't know when he married her or how long they were married. It's even not sure. Some say they had one child together. Some say he may have had more than one child. It's mashma, I think, that he had several children. Because the Tana de Belio, Avester of Nassan says that after he decided to learn that first year of marriage, where he was together with Rachel, he went to the Cheder. And it says in Avester of Nassan, he went with his child, with a 5-6-year-old boy, to grade 1 or pre 1A. Who knows what level it was? But he went and sat with and he held one side of the luach, and his young child held the other. Couldn't have been his child with Rachel. They were just married. So But it's very likely that they had a child that first year, so she was home with not only children from his first marriage, but with their own child. And then he went off to study by Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer.
And share with us who his third wife was, because that was really fascinating.
Wife. Yeah, so later on in life, he was already a venerable older man, an older sage. Chazal tell us he married Ashes Turnus Rufus. Turnus Rufus was, there's not a complete consensus, but my understanding of it is that he married the wife of the person who eventually executed him, and that she left him, became a Giores, and married, took care of Rabbi Akiva in his old age.
Unbelievable.
At least up until some point when he was makil kilos barabim, and he started teaching Torah against the law, and he was imprisoned. But maybe in those last years of his life, again, we don't know how many years before he passed away, he met her. It's not clear. Rabbi Akiva had a dialogue with Turnus Rufus. They had many philosophical discussions they had. The Gemara brings down. So how long he was married to her is not clear.
But one thing is clear, that when Rabbi Akiva gives credit to his wife, he gives it to Rachel. Like the Gemara says,
Shaliva shalachem shalah.
That everything he has goes to Rachel.
Belongs
So
to her, yeah.
she remains front and center.
Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. Rabbi Akiva, a lot of his life is turning negative situations into positive situations, or finding, the silver lining or a glimmer of hope in a very dark time. Where did he get that from?
So, we know he was a Talmud. The Gemara says he was a Talmud for 13 years of Nachum Ish Gamzu. And again, exactly when he started learning by Nachum Ish Gamzu is not clear. Maybe it was concurrent with his years at the academy of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but he had a shaykhus. He went certainly connected with Nachum Ish Gamzu, and would tell people all the time. Persons should always say, "Kol ma Dovid Rachman L'Tav," whatever Hashem does is for the best. Very similar to Gamzu L'Tova, which Nachum Ish Gamzu is famous for, and there's a whole chapter, not a whole chapter, there's a section in a chapter about that phrase that Rabbi Akiva would say and what it really means. How do we understand that? He's just telling us to have emunah, that everything is ultimately good and that one day we'll get rewarded in the next world? Or is he saying now in this world, right now we have to feel that it's good even when we don't see the good? So it's an interesting study. It's one of his most famous sayings. And I have a chapter with 5 of his most famous sayings, and that's one of them.
I saw that.
Yes. So that's.
As you're learning about the life of Rabbi Akiva, and you're looking at so many different svarim and makairis, was there a moment where you're like, wow, I never knew that, mind blown? Mm-hmm. Could you think of one moment where just like, the whole thing was kedai maybe just for that one moment? I know I'm setting expectations.
Many moments like that. Many moments like that. There's an incredible story about Rabbi Akiva before anyone knew him, when he was still a shepherd. There's a story, it's brought down in Chazal, of a man, doesn't say his name, of a man who worked as a sharecropper, stayed away from his family, I think for many months. He worked. And when he came time to get paid, the owner of the farm told him, "I can't pay you." And he said, "Well, if you can't pay me wages, maybe you could pay me in produce." And he said, "I can't pay you that either. And if you can't pay me in produce, maybe you could do this, you could do that." And he kept saying, "No." And the man in the story was accepting, and he goes home, arrives at his house, I think before Yom Kippur.
Penniless,
tells his wife he was away for so long, and he worked, and he brought back nothing. And then shortly after Yom Tov, the farmer comes and brings Akiva at the time, brings him his payment, and he brings him more, and this and that. And he asks, so the Shiltos, Reb Haigon, so one of the Shiltos says that the man in that story was Rabbi Akiva.
Wow.
So this is story.
Because the story I knew, but that part I didn't know.
Okay, so when we say that Rachel saw that he was Sanua Uma. What did she see? She saw something in him. She didn't see a simple man who could become great because she would push him to learn Torah. She saw something unique about this man. These are some of the midos and the dan l'kaf schus and the patience and the not wishing or willing to hurt anybody. And when the man asked him, why did you? He said, maybe you had this problem, maybe somebody owed you had lent money and he wasn't yet ready to pay you back, and you thought you'd have it in time to pay me, blah. And he says, yes, that's exactly what happened. And everything that you said about me was true, and here's your reward finally. And the Shulta says that was Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva was Sanua Umale. I also say that we all know from his famous martyrdom at the end of his life, he's about to lose his soul. It's being taken away from him by the Romans who were torturing him and making him suffer. And his last words, almost the last words that he uttered in this world, was that Kol Yamai, all my days, I wanted to fulfill the mitzvah of B'chol Nafshecha, of serving Hashem with all your soul. There's a whole chapter on that and exactly what he meant, but these are his last words. And he says, Kol Yamai. He didn't say starting at the age of 40, starting at the age of 50 after I became a Talmid Chacham. He says, Kol Yamai. Let's believe him. Let's believe him that from his bar mitzvah, whenever he became an adult, from his earliest stages, he davened and he said Kriya Shema with tremendous kavana. When he said B'chol Nafshecha, he really meant B'chol Nafshecha. He wanted to serve Hashem with every fiber.
Even in the first 40 years.
There's a Tosfos that says that even though Rabbi Akiva was an Am Haaretz, he was Shomer Torah mitzvahs and this and that. I'm saying Tosfos, the faint praise of Tosfos is perhaps there was really much, much more. And she saw this devout, sincere man of 40 years old who davened like nobody else, who said Kriya Shema like nobody else. His B'chol Nafshecha took him 10 minutes, and he was so kind and so open-hearted and so generous and so trusting and dan l'kaf schus to every other person he interacted. These are the things that Rachel Bas Kalbasov saw in Rabbi Akiva, and she said, if only he learns Torah, if only he takes all those wonderful midos and milos and he adds Torah to that, we'll have a special person in Klal Yisrael. Because the question is, the Ben Yehuda asked the question. He says, was there nobody else who she wanted to teach him Torah, help get him to learn Torah? Was there nobody else who already knew Torah that she could marry?
She was the big daughter of the biggest clear. She could get the best bachar brisk.
Absolutely, she had the pick of the litter.
I kind of push back a little bit because there's one statement that the Gemara says, and you quote it in the book, obviously, it's a little troubling. The Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva said that during his period of being quote unquote an Am Haaretz, if he would have seen a Talmid Chacham, he would have bit him like the bite of
Anachshenu
kachamar, which is the Gemara says is irreparable damage.
Yes.
So how do we find the Midas Taivais, the Shmir Satayra mitzvahs, like you're saying from Taisus on one hand, but on the other hand, we have a statement like that, which the Gemara does quote.
So your question is asked by Tosfos. He said, how could she see him as Sanua Amale? He himself confessed that he said about himself, Anashchenu kachamor. So Tosfos answers is that there was certainly in Rabbi Akiva's mind there was justification to be angry and upset with the Talmidei Chachamim of that generation who were disdainful towards Amei Haaretz. So what Tosfos means to say, I don't think Tosfos is saying he was necessarily right about the Talmidei Chachamim. Maybe he shouldn't have felt that way, but the way he felt had nothing to do with midos. As in his perception, the Talmidei Chachamim were acting wrongly. They wouldn't even touch the Am Haaretz, and they were afraid of tumah. So they did not properly treat and interact with the common people, the common folk, the simple people of their generation. And he was furious with them for that. But it wasn't a bad midah. It was, he felt he had pure justification. That's what Tosfos learns. The Ritva says that he was wrong and that he did have that anger, but once he started learning Torah,
it smoothed it out.
So obviously the Ritva is saying is that she saw he had generally good midos, and that with Torah because if he didn't have good midos, if that aspect of him was so bad and so awful, she would have stayed away from him. But the Ritva thing is that but once he learned, he uprooted that midah of anger as well, and became perfect in his demeanor.
Speaking about Rabbi Akiva, like there's one time in the calendar year at least that most people focus on Rabbi Akiva, and that's during the period of Sfiras HaOmer, which I was wondering like why you didn't release the book during the Omer, because everything is about timing.
Yeah.
And then I had a tshuva, because Amar Rabbi Akiva ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. Is there a better time to release it than after Tisha B'Av, when we're all into Avas Chinam? So that was my tshuva. But getting back to that,
I think a book about Rabbi Akiva could come out any month of the year. There's something you can connect to his life. Certainly, we have the Yom Tov of Sukkot coming up, right? So there's a chapter devoted to Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer argue on why we sit in a sukkah.
Right.
And I think most of us, I know myself included, for most of my life, Rabbi Eliezer, he says the Anani HaKavod, that's such a wonderful, beautiful, symbolic. We sit in a sukkah to symbolize what Hashem did. He protected us with majestic clouds. And it's Rabbi Akiva, nobody really understands. Why are we going? Because they protect. Anyway, the chapter explains.
Yeah, you got to see that.
But the chapter explains that Rabbi Akiva, it's not a simple shita. It's very complicated. But it's fascinating and enlightening to understand why Rabbi Akiva felt that way. That we commemorate. Rabbi Akiva knew there were clouds, and Rabbi Eliezer knew that there were sukkahs. They didn't argue on whether or not what the facts were. That would be too simplistic to say these great men were arguing on what happened. No, they both agreed what happened. They left Mitzrayim with majestic clouds, and they sat in actual sukkahs mamish, whether it was for the elements or from heat or from cold. But they disagree on what the focus has to be. And
yeah, I was so intrigued by the fact that there's a whole chapter on that machlokes, which we kind of brush over. Maybe we see when we learn Mishnah Berurah Chasukkah what the kavanah should be, but you got to buy this book just to read that chapter alone.
I didn't realize that it was going to be like that. I knew it was something I wanted to maybe do a section in a chapter as one of his famous opinions, but as it unfolded, there was so many layers to explain, and it grew into an entire chapter. Yeah,
that's fantastic.
But you were asking about the time of Sfira.
Yeah, because I think that's really important. Rabbi Akiva, 24 years, 24,000 Talmidim. The entire future of Klal Yisrael is in his hands, and then he loses every single one of them in such a short period of time, perhaps, and he's kind of left with nothing. I mean, it's so shocking to go through such a period of time. And then we have Lag BaOmer to celebrate that they stopped dying because there's no one left to die. Take us
which is a tremendous question.
Yes, that's where I want to go with this.
How could we celebrate a day? Yes, there were no more deaths by the end of that day, but that's because there was no one left to die.
Correct. So what is that celebration? What are we doing on Lag BaOmer?
Yeah. So we address those things. By the way, you mentioned 24 years and 24,000 Talmidim. So I think offhandedly, you basically expressed the opinion of the Doros HaRishonim that Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 Talmidim who died were the same ones he collected or amassed over those 24 years, and most historians and again my understanding of Chazal is not like that. Is it was not those 24,000 because he was only 64 years old when he had those 24,000 Talmidim.
Yeah.
Right, he was only 64. And the context in which Chazal tell us Rabbi Akiva taught new Talmidim after his many Talmidim died is the pasuk in Koheles, Babokos zarecha, in the morning plant your seeds, uva'erev al tanach yodecha, and in the evening don't cease from continue working. You have to continue to work even in the evening. And Chazal understand those words to say, even if you've taught your whole life, right? And they apply it to Rabbi Akiva. He taught his whole life, and he lost everything at the end of his life. And what did he do? He still got up, al tanach yodecha, he went out and found new Talmidim. So it's much more logical that Rabbi Akiva was already 100, 110, 115 years old, somewhere towards the end of his life when he lost his 24,000 Talmidim. but he picked himself up. And
that's Lag BaOmer. That's how I always
and
understood
the
Lag
Pri Chodesh
BaOmer.
explains, he
Yes.
says, we celebrate Lag BaOmer because, yes, on that day he lost his Talmidim, he was devastated, he was heartbroken, but he didn't give up. He didn't become despondent. He didn't give in to Yiush. He got up, he found Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, and he found Rav Meir, and he found Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, and 2 or 4 other Talmidim, 5 or 7 Talmidim, and he started again.
Which is Rabbi Akiva.
That is
Never letting
Rabbi
take you
Akiva.
down and just bringing you
That
back
is
up
Rabbi
again.
Akiva.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most difficult period of time or most challenging part for us to even wrap our minds around is Rabbi Akiva's last day, where they were Soirikim and Masreka Shabar, so they comb him with iron combs. And instead of screaming out in agony and pain and saying, or even Rabbeinu Shalom, this is where everything that I did ends. He says, my whole life I was waiting, b'chol nafsh, kol masai kaimena, like you said before. And I know that there's a chapter into the final chapter, if you want to call it that, into his life. Give us a little bit
It's not the final chapter, the with all your soul. This chapter is called With All Your Soul, b'chol nafshecha.
I meant final chapter of his life. Okay.
Yes, the final chapter of his life. After that, we talk about, there is a fascinating chapter about his kfura. Again, we have Eliyahu Hanavi coming into the picture, and he is, Chazal tell us, Eliyahu Hanavi first went to get Rabbi Yehoshua Agarsi, who was Rabbi Akiva's attendant the last days of his life in prison, and he takes Rabbi Yehoshua Agarsi with him, probably on Motzei Yom Kippur, and they go to the prison, and they find the attendants and the warden. They're all sleeping, and they go in and they take Rabbi Akiva and they bury him that night. They carry him all night and they bring him to his final resting place. But yes, of course, the chapter of B'chol Nafshecha, With All Your Soul, it's fascinating. The tale itself and the story itself is fascinating and inspiring. But there are so many facets to it. What was he doing? Was he simply doing a Kiddush Hashem, of not giving in to the Romans? I'm sure the Romans told him, if you denounce your religion, we'll let you live. If you denounce Judaism, if you get up in front of your people and you say you'll embrace our paganism, that he could live. Is that what he did? That he simply refused to give in, b'chol nafshecha, or is there some other element to the b'chol nafshecha? Is it really b'chol nafshecha, or is it the whole pasuk of b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol ma'odecha? There are many, many subtleties and questions as to exactly what it was he was thinking.
And we come back to this every Tisha B'Av and every Yom Kippur. That's when we come back to Asar
Harugei Malchus. Interesting, of the Asar Harugei Malchus, the Gemara calls it Rabbi Akiva v'Chaveira.
That's correct.
So somehow, even within those 10 amazing tzaddikim who died, and they were all amazing Tanaim, who somehow their lives were so holy they could be mechaper for the mistakes of the Shvatim. It's still called Rabbi Akiva v'Chaveira.
And like you look at this Maisa and you look at the Zu Torah v'Zu Schara type of thing on one hand, and on the other hand, we know the Neshama is Nitzchi and Klal Yisrael is Nitzchi, and the fact that millennia later there is a book in English about the life of Rabbi Akiva means that Rabbi Akiva continues to live on.
And Levi, there should be more, and other people should look into it.
And we learn his Torah too.
And nothing in this, by the way, I am certainly unqualified in anything outside the realm of Pshat. Even that I struggle with, and as do most of us. But there's certainly many Sfarim in Hebrew and maybe in English one day that approach Rabbi Akiva from a much more esoteric perspective, and all kinds of things in the world of Torah Sanister, which are not in the book. And I just simply want to add, take the opportunity. I'm no big bucky. I don't know. In the olden days, I could never write a sefer. Someone like me could never write a sefer. But today, Baruch Hashem, with some of the technology that exists to do searching and be able to look at different Chazal, Oitzer HaChachma, and the Bar Ilan programs, and finding, and it really is a little bit of Hillel Machayev Esaniyim kind of thing. Anybody out there who knows how to learn a little bit, doesn't have the great Bekias, if you get those machshirim, you get those implements, can do a lot of learning, So I urge anybody out there, who feels he could write and give our people chizuk through writing, to get those implements and use them to write.
After you finish writing the Sefer...
Could I just go back to one other thing you mentioned to me about Zu Torah v'Zu Schara? Obviously, who asked that question? Zu Torah v'Zu Schara was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai. He's asking Hashem. He sees Hashem as Koisher Kshar. He's adding little crowns to the letters. He got Kol HaTorah Kula from Bereshis to Le'enei Kol Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu was explained the whole Torah. He was given the broad idea of mitzvos and the Torah itself. He saw the entire. Then he sees Hashem the last thing he's doing. He's koshek sharm. So he says to Rabbi Hashem, "What do you need it for? What is it adding to the Torah?" He couldn't see any redeeming value for these little crowns. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows him a vision of Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is giving a shir on the Tagim, right? Moshe Rabbeinu joins the shir in his vision, right? He doesn't understand it, and he's besides himself. And Hashem consoles him that don't worry. Rabbi Akiva himself is going to say, "Halacha l'Moshe miSinai." This comes from Moshe. Moshe was come, but he asks an intriguing question to Hashem. It's wonder why he asked that, but he said, "What's the man's reward? You've shown me his Torah. You've shown me his amazing genius, right? What is his reward?" And he sees Rabbi Akiva. He sees a vision of in a Roman marketplace that they're announcing that they have the flesh of Rabbi Akiva, right? So I believe that Chas v'shalom, Rabbi Akiva's body was not cut up. It wasn't sold in the market. It wasn't weighed in a meat market. They scraped his flesh with masrekos shel barzel, and according to the Ben Yehoyada, they did that for weeks. They didn't just do that on his last day of life. They did that for weeks. And that's how he was able to answer his Talmidim, even though he was saying Kriya Shema. He didn't answer during Kriya Shema. He wasn't mafsik in the middle of Kriya Shema and answer how he was able to say Kriya Shema while he was being tortured. He answered it after. But it happened to him for day in, day out, day in. Finally, at the end of his life, he lost his life the same way. But the flesh that Moshe Rabbeinu saw in the marketplace being sold, little pieces of flesh that they scraped over. If Moshe Rabbeinu had seen Rabbi Akiva's Misa, Al Kiddush Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu would not have said Zu Torah v'Zu Schara. He knew that there are times when Klal Yisrael is Ma'aseh Nefesh and Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. He probably knew and saw visions, in the future of other tragedies and other things that were going to befall Klal Yisrael. But to see a living man who was the greatest leader and the embarrassment for obviously the leader, for the Torah itself, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, Zu Torah v'Zu Schara was something he couldn't imagine. So I connect the Ben Yehoyada who says it wasn't the actual Tira that Moshe Rabbeinu was commenting.
Very interesting.
But it's just a possibility. There could be other explanations.
Rabbi, at some point did you say, I need to write a new Rabbi Akiva song? It's a different Rabbi Akiva than 20 years ago.
It would have many more verses.
That's correct.
That's you can add pages to a book. Maybe adding too many lyrics to a song is not a good idea. People only have a certain attention span when they're listening to music. Hopefully, when they sit on Shabbos with the Sefer, they can get through many of the nuances.
Rabbi, who's the next person? What's your next book? What's your next initiative?
I don't know yet. I'm really struggling to come up with a direction, but it's Hashem. Meantime, I'm still
basking in the light of this one.
I would say basking in the light, but still, talking about it, trying to promote it. Hopefully, get people interested. And I want to thank you for the excerpt you took from it for last Shabbos, and it's Hashem. But hopefully, it'll give chizuk to Yidden all over Rabbi Akiva also was always thinking about the Geula. He was always focused on the end. It's fascinating. There's a machlokas between Rav Nosson and Rabbi Akiva and the interpretation of we're so many years later after Torah Sheba'al Peh has been written down. We can look at a Sfarim Shank and look and read Torah Sheba'al Peh and the interpretations that the Gemara gives us, that the Medrash gives us. They didn't have that. Rabbi Akiva didn't have a place where he could go. He had the psukim. He had the pasuk of Chagai, and he had a pasuk from Zachariah, and a pasuk from Chavakuk, and psukim from Yeshaya. But they had to figure it out with no help. They would sit, they would argue, they would discuss, they would talk. Maybe there was a little Masorah somewhere. Maybe somebody heard what somebody said to his Rebbe, to his Talmud. But there was a pasuk. There's a pasuk in Chagai about Od Achas Ma'ati. There's going to be another one, and it's going to be a short one. And Reb Nosson says it refers to the second Beis HaMikdash. And during the years of the second Beis HaMikdash, Ma'ati will be the Shulton Yisrael in those days. The Greeks are going to occupy, the Romans are going to occupy. If you count the 420 years, you're going to see that the majority of the years that Bnei Yisrael had the Bayis Sheni, we were under occupation. That's how he learns Pshat in Achas Ma'ati. Rabbi Akiva learned it. He said, Oid Achas Ma'ati, the second Golus, is going to be shorter than the first Golus. That's how Rabbi Akiva learned. The first Golus was Shivim Shana. Second Golus is going to be less. And Punkt, who comes into his life towards the end of those 70 years, between 50 and 60 years after the Churban, who comes into this Bar Kochba, this charismatic man who was a tzaddik.
Could have been Mashiach, perhaps.
And he really felt that this was but he was when he went to the Beis HaMikdash, he felt Mashiach coming. He went to Rome and he saw paganism flourishing. He felt and saw the destiny of Klal Yisrael. So he was a tremendous Mitzapel Yeshua, a tremendous Ohev Yisrael, in addition to all the other things we mentioned and spoke about.
There's one line that kind of jumps out at me. He taught us all a legend for all time. That's from your Song of Rabbi Akiva. And after reading this book and talking to you, it feels timeless, and that the legacy of Rabbi Akiva continues to endure. And like you said, in Mirz Hashem, the hope and the tzipiyah Yeshua that Rabbi Akiva had for Geula Shalema should be something that we ourselves can experience. And we'll have a little dance, Mirz Hashem, with the book, and with Rabbi Akiva perhaps. With the Geula Shalema B'mheira.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Yashikach, baby, this was a schus, a pleasure, and it really was very enjoyable to hear more about the book. Yes. I feel like this is like the introduction. Let's keep going,
Yeah. We didn't cover everything, so you still have to go out and get the copy.
100%. Buy the book, be inspired by the book, uplifted by the book, learn it. It's a timeless book, and Mirz Hashem, a book that will lead us to the final chapter, to the Geula Shalema.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.